What's going on, sports card hobby friends? It is another day. It is another sports card collectible style video. I'm glad to see you. We are back again. If you are new here, you like what you hear, and you want daily sports card collectibles videos, hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to connect with me on IG at SportsCardDad. Guys, are people underestimating the future demand for sports cards and really collectibles as a whole? We'll talk a little bit about that later on, the other collectibles, but sports cards in general. Look, this is kind of a part two to yesterday's conversation, and we just talked about, hey, are there end collectors for a lot of this stuff? And really the answer is no for most of it. But let's build off of this a little bit to where, we're, like we talked about, in a very down market for sports card prices for the most part. 2.5 years, we've been slowly declining, death by 1,000 cuts or whatever that expression is. Before I continue, big thanks to today's video sponsor, VeriSwap. Maybe you've got some cards you're like, you know what? I could trade these. I don't necessarily need these forever. Maybe you have some cash too that you could add into the mix. VeriSwap has got all sorts of different cards, collectibles. All the cool stuff is on the VeriSwap app. They verify the sales between the two parties to make sure that we're not doing these back alley deals anymore, guys, because I'm tired of doing it. Woo! Check out the VeriSwap app. I'll have it in the video description as well as in the pinned comments down below. Future sports card demand. Let's look at where we are today versus where we were in the past. This is always something that people struggle with, myself included sometimes. We get wrapped up in just kind of daily life, and we don't take time to really reflect on how far we've come. And I think about media, sports card media, which sounds kind of funny. It's such a niche space. But 5 years ago, was anybody making a reel on IG about sports cards, whether it be just a collector holding up a card or at a show or anything? Was there any sort of IG reel related to sports cards 5 years ago in 2018? I would bet not. I would bet very, very few, if any. You look at YouTube going back 5 years, 2018, in cards. Not much. There was, yes, some collector content out there, but now there's a lot more collector content on YouTube. There's news stuff like what I do. There's vlogs from shows. There's a whole variety of different styles of content depending on what you're looking for. Podcasts. How many dedicated sports card podcasts were out 5 years ago? Very few, not many at all. And now even with 2.5 year declines in pricing, there is a much larger amount of sports card content than there was 5 years ago as things were starting to really kind of move up. As things were rolling along and people getting excited, we're starting to build into that euphoric stage with card values, trading card values. It's not even close. I mean, there's a lot more content now than there was back then. And I kind of asked myself too, how much of my future demand belief, I guess, with trading cards has to do with Fanatics entering the space? And I really do think it's a lot of it. Not that Topps and Panini wouldn't do it on their own, but just the fact that you finally have a monstrosity of a company that's coming in, and I know there's definitely going to be pitfalls to that as well. It's not all positive. It's not all rainbows and sunshine. But the fact that you have got a company that is bought in and paid so much to get into the space, they paid a lot to make a lot. So just keep that in mind. Now, for the average consumer, it probably doesn't mean that prices are going to come down unless they're just going to have a whole variety of different price point products, which they probably will do that. But the fact of the matter is this company paid a lot of money to come in and they want to make a lot of money. So they are going to put effort, tons of effort. They are not going to sit on their laurels. Now, will there be QC problems and this sort of thing that you see? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. This is like Amazon, Walmart now in the sports card space, if you really think of it from that standpoint. And now, YouTube and all these other places, IG, it's like Yelp reviews for restaurants. You've got every single time that there's going to be an issue, it's going to be talked about. And Fanatics is really going to be the only company, the only game in town for licensed cards here in a couple years. So it's kind of like looking at Amazon complaints. My package was not delivered today. My package is late. They promised this. They promised that. It'll be endless. It'll be endless content for people that do want to make that daily. I mean, you could make it daily. You could make it multiple times a day. Probably. There will be absolutely no shortage of issues there. But you know what? There will also be no shortage of media attention on it. There will be no shortage of whether it be content creators that are Fanatics content creators or just people that are in the space because, oh wow, Fanatics is also part of this. They're marketing it at baseball stadiums and they're marketing at, all these different places, concerts or wherever. Even just from what we've seen from the marketing side over the last 12 months is a big difference than what we have seen before. And so that's just where we are today, where really the stuff hasn't been figured out with the licenses yet. The Fanatics supposed to take over in a couple years. They're really pressing to take over like now. And of course, we're going to go through this kind of weird time where we don't know what's up and what's down.
One shall stand, one shall fall.
But in a couple of years, it's going to be smoothed over, and then we're going to look back. It'll be kind of forgotten, just like the weekly news, the monthly news. There's all these like news items that were big news, a month ago, and people have already forgotten about it. A lot of the stuff we're going through now, people are going to move on from it. We're going to reach a point where it is more dialed in, I believe anyway. And I think Panini too will pivot as well. If they don't have licenses for these specific sports, they still make great trading cards. I think that they're going to pivot to other things and they're still going to have viable products out there. So there's not going to be a shortage of options for people looking to get into trading cards. There's going to be all sorts of different things. Discussed yesterday, sentiment is at all-time lows. Prices are moving down dramatically. You're seeing a lot of content too around questioning like what is rare anymore. And I think it's natural. And I saw a good live by Dan the Cardman, and there was another guy he had on. This is going back a few weeks, and they were talking about Panini parallels and how they're overdoing it. And I completely agree with the overall logical sentiment of what they're talking about as far as all the different sets go and the increase in parallels. And you've really seen it, especially from 2021 forward. That product is really where parallels, the different styles of parallels have amped up. But saying that, I think that it's easy also to kind of take the other extreme where we're questioning. They were talking about gold prisms. And are these even rare if they've got 20 years of gold prisms numbered out of 10? So that's 200 cards. To me, that's still rare, and even stuff that's numbered out of 25. I mean, yes, if you have 1,000 different parallels and they go up, 149, 199, 249, all the way up to 50,000, they just keep on going with all the different colors, different shades of purple, violet, and mauve, or is that a color? Anyway, they've got like 500 different colors. It still remains that you will have the ones at the lower end that are lower numbered that are still rare. And yes, same picture of the card and all of this. But even if they do go absolutely ballistic, there will still be those lower numbered cards. Now, also they could do all these different variations of gold where it's like gold shimmer out of 10 and true gold out of 10 and, gold and silver out of 10. They can overdo the lower numbered stuff. So valid points there. Also, there's Prism, but there's also 20 other products. I've just made the distinction that the other products, to me, are not going to be as relevant moving forward. So I'm focused in on just Prism, Optics Select, National Treasures, Flawless. Really, the 5 products are the only Panini products I'll buy. I'm not buying Flux or Noir or some of the other stuff, even though they have great cards. Some of those cards look awesome. Just not going to bother with those just because it's just too much. But again, because sentiment is low, there is questions around what is actually rare. And again, I think that definitely a lot of valid points from 2020 forward for a lot of the Panini products. But once you start going back in time a little bit, there is less supply where I feel comfortable. And the other part is just we don't know what the demand is going to be. So right now, demand is low. Demand is way lower than it was going back a couple of years, going back a few years. Will it stay low? That's a big question. Will it stay low? Because if the answer is yes, demand stays low or demand stays like this forever, then yeah, sure, price points are going to reflect that. But what if it doesn't stay low? What if there are, that many more collectors that are looking for this specific player or this specific set? We're assuming future demand based on what we've seen in the past. And frankly, if you look before pandemic, pre-COVID stuff, it's fairly flat as far as the amount of collectors, the amount of hobbyists. It's fairly flat. And then of course we saw that everybody's in and then everybody's out, like the kind of the quick Mount Everest boom. But I think the Mount Everest boom showed what's possible. It showed what's possible. People will say like, well, that wasn't realistic. It wasn't realistic if you're looking at the years prior to it. But what if that was realistic in the future, over time, built over time? So we got that huge wave. What happens if we can kind of slowly build the wave back up? But maybe it takes 5 years. Maybe it takes 10. Maybe it takes 15 to get to that level again where we have that many participants. And that is really what's going to have an effect on prices, in my opinion. And so that's where I'm thinking, like, everyone is kind of assuming that based on past results, what's that thing in financial services that they talk about with stocks? It's like, we can't guarantee future performance based on past results. Just because Apple stock has been here doesn't mean it's going to go there. And it's kind of the same world when we look at collectibles. We just don't know. Hell, I just saw an auction end on Heritage Auctions for an original model 1977 X-Wing Red Leader, and it's a model of the plane that was used in the original Star Wars, and it's the model that they used to shoot with. So when you look at, when you watch that movie, of course they're not actually flying through space. They're using a model to make that movie, and then they put the cool background. And so one of those sold that was used to make that movie, New Hope, for over $3 million here recently. So people are still putting money into alternative investments, and collectibles fall into the alternative investment bucket. I understand that's not a sports card, but it just shows you that there is still a lot of people that, whether or not they care about future growth or they just want to show these things off to their buddies because it's a really cool talking piece. I mean, imagine being a billionaire or whatever, having something like that in your house, in your man cave. It'd be incredible. So this is all about the fun. It's not necessarily... So to reiterate here too, yes, of course, future values and this and that or whatever, but there's also just an element of fun to it too, where, hey, look, we have fun collecting this particular player, and I want to be able to show off to other Drew Brees collectors what I've got, or be able to show it off to friends or whatever. So I think people still have to be careful underestimating the nostalgia with the demographic age 30, I'm going to say age 30 to about age 50, maybe 55, that fall into this world that grew up in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, that have all this awesome, really the greatest pop culture era of all time, and they have disposable income and they want cool stuff. So I think that future demand is going to be an interesting thing to watch. Guys, that's all I've got today. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.